This session number 2 is titled Interactivity Intermedia, and for reasons that I'll explain in a few minutes, I just want to start with a quote by Paulo Freire, who's this great Brazilian educator, educational philosophy, and there will be a reason why I'm actually bringing him up, but I'm going to use a term. I'm going to start with a term that's probably not associated with gatherings like this that often talk about technology and science and composition. Maybe the improvisers use this term, but the term is love, which is a term that Freire was actually embraced quite a bit in his sort of educational philosophy. But he says this in his book, Teachers as Cultural Workers, Letters to Those Who Dare Teach. We must dare, in the full sense of the word, to speak of love without the fear of being called ridiculous, mawkish, or unscientific, if not anti-scientific. We must dare in order to say scientifically, and not as mere blah, 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 that we study, we learn, we teach, we know with our entire body. So that's sort of a reference to, I think, the way that Vijay opened up our conversation this morning. We do all of these things with feeling, with emotion, with wishes, with fear, with doubts, with passion, and also with critical reasoning. However, we never study, learn, teach, or know with the last only. We must dare so as never to dichotomize cognition and emotion. We must dare so that we can continue to teach for a long time under conditions that we know well, low salaries, lack of respect, and the ever-present risk of becoming a prey to cynicism. We must dare to learn how to dare in order to say no to the bureaucratization of the mind to which we are exposed every day. So this concept of the bureaucratization of the mind, I think, is something that we are all grappling with, I think, in terms of interdisciplinarity, and certainly, I think, if you don't mind projecting onto both of your works, Yarek and Ajay, in terms of just interactivity and intermedia type of work. So the reason why I bring this up is because our third presenter, who is Jeff Kaiser from UCSD, was not able to make it due to an illness, and I kind of feel a little bit, when I had disrupted some of our course scheduling at one point, he stepped in and taught a course for our graduate students in Max MSP. So his talk actually was in reference to Freire's work. And here's just a quote from his abstract. Regarding Max MSP, the hierarchical and categorical nature, along with the concrete functions of given objects and patch construction within Max MSP, can lead to instructors into traditional educational models as delineated by Paulo Freire of teacher as transmitter of information and students as receivers of information. And so, again, bureaucracy of the mind, I think he was trying to address this by some of these tools that we tend to use in music technology and Max MSP, and how perhaps there are various ways in which we can approach teaching the material using tools like that. So with that, that's my spiel. I'd like to turn it over, if that's okay, to my colleague Chris Dobrin, who might say a few words. He's stepped up to the plate because Jeff's not here, about sort of this idea of interactivity intermedia as it relates to what you've been doing here, perhaps, in your own work and also in an educational context.
I would be happy to do that, but I think I might actually call another audible, which is, I noticed that it's now 1:45, which is right where we expected to be if we had 3 presenters. So I think there's no need for me to kill any time, certainly. And so I think we should just go ahead and have our 3 presenters and then open up the music chapter.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'd like to introduce, that's okay, Ajay Kapoor, and I, maybe because we are on time, Ajay, you are the executive director and founder of Carmetic, right? Correct? 2006, and you run the music technology group. You're the director of the music technology group at CalArts, and you're also associate dean of the digital media area. Is that correct? All right, I'm just trying to remember this from my notes, but Ajay.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk about our MFA program in music technology at CalArts. And I want to talk about how teaching technology can empower new types of music and new types of creative practice. And I want to talk about the way we've set up the curriculum in order to get the results, which I'll try and show you at the end what the students are able to do. So just a little bit about the music technology program. We actually started as an undergraduate program. We now have 30 undergrads and 9 MFA students, which is really exciting. The students, it's very interesting, especially being at CalArts. A lot of them are very interested in being professional electronic musicians, and it's actually really crazy because every year at least 2 or 3 of the students actually get signed to labels in the electronic music field and are touring, which is really ridiculous and amazing that that's happening. And the idea of people are also interested in doing research and getting set up to go and do a PhD, and also they're also preparing for industry, and whether that be in the music industry or in the entertainment industry, having the knowledge about being creative and about being a musician, but also having the chops technically to actually think outside the box and go work in these different places. So there are 3 main areas that I think are important that we teach. First is audio signal processing and synthesis. We want the musicians that come in to be able to make their own sound. So it's not like we just want you to plug into whatever random box that makes a sound. We want you to be able to build your own sound to make you a unique musician, and that's important. And we use native instruments, and of course you can use Max MSP, which is great. But I think the thing that we focus on that's very different is actually computer science. We spend, the first year with our students teaching them first Chuck, and which is, music programming language, and then move on to processing, which is really important because Chuck is very C-like and processing is very Java-like. So right away in the first year, you have this wonderful idea of what the world of programming is, which will help them along the way, even in their next year as programmers doing creative work. We actually won an NSF grant last year to actually teach this curriculum and figure out how can you teach computer science through music. And I'll just show you an example. Each week in these classes, we give them a bunch of computer science skills. I'm basically reading a computer science book and then writing it for the curriculum for them, and they have to make a 30-second composition. And then at the end, they have to make a little performance. I'll show you a little bit. Is there more volume on this? So you get the idea. Everyone has a different aesthetic, and they're just experimenting with whatever they're doing with, and they wrote the code themselves, which was really exciting. Recently, actually last week, we've taken this course and put it onto Coursera. So now everyone can take this course. So I encourage anyone who's interested, you can please come and sign up and figure out, how we're doing this, and we want to share it with the world because we do think this is the right way to go. The second thing we do is in the second year of their MFA, we actually throw them into C++. Because of the first year, where most people come in not knowing anything about computer science, getting them through that curriculum, it's like, okay, at the end of the second year, they want to do all these new things now. Now they have the passion that I want to learn this. And so we can start doing advanced C++ things where they're actually building things for their iPhone, their iPad, and doing open frameworks and whatever else is going on. So we did signal processing, we've done computer science, and again, all of these things done in a musical context. And the next big thing is circuit design. So this is again a class we do as MFA1s. where we throw them into a class to teach them Arduino, okay, and teach them how to use sensors and how to build an instrument alongside all the software that they're learning. So they're learning how to make all these sounds on their computer, but then the rule in this class is like, okay, you're not actually allowed to touch your computer, and you have to make something in which you interface and create, all these different sounds. So the students have made all these amazing instruments. Like this is a laser controller, this is a I don't actually know what it is, but you jump up and down on it and it actually does some kind of score following. This is also amazing. This is actually an animator that came into our MFA program, and you can also see another thread is this idea of CAD and drawing out what your instrument's going to be. So he drew out what he wanted to be, and then he actually realized it, which is really important. And that's becoming a big thread in our program as well. We just got 2 3D printers, which is exciting, and we're trying to teach people how to, when you're building an instrument, how do you get it prepared to work with laser cutters and really have intention in your design. This was an interesting, again, experimental type of instrument. So these are foot pedals that move X, Y, and Z to be used with like guitar and bass. So again, everyone has their own aesthetics. These are just a box of IR sensors that this person used to play with like drums, and he would put all these IR sensors all around his instrument and customize what he wanted to do. And again, just building whatever you need to be a professional electronic musician. So it's very exciting. And at the end, anytime you work with electronics, you always do it wrong the first time, but it's the way to like jump in and actually do it. You're building something for yourself that you're excited. That first moment when you realize this sensor that you're hooking up is now controlling like a filter sweep or like the reverb, it's just such an exciting moment on their eyes, and it's like the key is like how do you get into that as quickly as possible and then let them redo everything that they thought they were going to do. So it's pretty exciting. And the other thing that we do is have these digital performance ensembles. So this again, the goal of it is to have them do this in their second year, where faculty from music technology work with faculty from other parts of the music school. For instance, this class is digital Indonesian music, where I work with Wentin, who teaches in our Gamelan program, and the idea is for this project, we had students from either side, and we actually ended up building this robotic little Indonesian system. This is really cool because that system, that song we were playing was a song that Wenton's always wanted to play, but it was so hard to get enough, people at a certain level to actually play that song. So we could record and, it was actually quite hard to build software. A student did it to actually play the song, on the robotic rayon so that then, the 6, 7 humans that were in the ensemble could actually play along. So it took the part of 3 people. We also have a very strong Indian program, and I love working, especially with Ashish, on a number of different experiments, and again, bringing both sides together. So you can see the robot leading his whole ensemble. Lots of different experiments. As you can probably tell, we do a lot with robotics. We're really trying to show the students, especially the ones who are interested, after they have made sensor systems, how can you do things with making actually machines move, and really work with spatialization of sounds. So sounds don't only have to come from speakers; they can come from anywhere. And the machine orchestra is definitely our flagship ensemble as a digital arts ensemble. So the idea is with that ensemble, to get into it, you have to have already built your own interface. And this was something we did last year, where we actually used the ensemble to actually tell this story. And we had an animator tell these stories about these 5 different animals that are getting reincarnated into each other. So I think a big key is that having this curriculum where we're teaching them these technical skills, but then showing how faculty are doing these big projects, getting them involved, and basically, showing them what can you do when we all work as a team to do these big things. And then the important part is now you have to do your own thing and lead your own project. And there's it's very interdisciplinary to the point that only half of the credits are required. The other half you can take from anywhere actually in the whole institute to get done what you need to get your final project done. So there's been a lot of interesting projects. This is the Arduino project that Dimitri made that turns the Arduino actually into a MIDI library. So he's very technical, and that's what he did for the community, and he's released that to the community. And hundreds of people have used this open source software. This was another project he did, very installation driven. He's using his iPhone right now to control, a series of lights as an installation. Jeff is working with conductive thread and making systems to control a disc clavier. Colin's really interested in making this idea called the third room, which is this virtual reality space where you can go and pick up these virtual instruments and just play and shake and do whatever you want. We even have robots, so wherever these balls are striking, we have robots sitting all in the space around you as well. So it's a surround sound and surround vision type of situation. We started teaching machine learning actually this year. This was from last week. And this student has built this hand interface, but what's interesting is that he's trained the computer to these certain gestures, and you can hear the noises, like he's trained it to different sounds. So this is scary, because, teaching musicians machine learning, there's so much that can be done. This is another project we're doing, again, using feature detection, using microphones. This is actually the CalArts campus, and we have microphones placed at least in those places right now, and it gives us energy readings of, the sound happening in these areas. So we want to make sound maps, and we actually just won a Google grant, and doing this with NYU, trying to get CalArts campus and NYU campus having these type of sound maps. And the biggest thing that we're trying to do is how do you teach these type of technologies? So this is an idea that we came together with Stanford. This is the old paradigm where you sit and you talk to everyone behind their computers, doing a one-to-many type of learning. But we were thinking, what if we gave each student an HD TV? And so then we could actually see what they're doing. So it would turn into something like this, which we call the end-to-end learning system. So Sony actually donated these TVs for us, and this is our machine lab where all of these TVs and all the robots live as well. And you can kind of see what we're doing with it. This is the machine lab at CalArts, where we've implemented the end-to-end classroom. This is where we're using all these TVs to teach computer science, electrical engineering, signal processing, and music technology to students, democratizing the way in which we teach, where students can teach each other. Okay, I'm out of time, but that's a glimpse into what we're doing. Thank you.
So, I'd like to invite up Jarek Kapuczynski from Stanford University, intermedia artist. You're directing the intermedia studio, which I think is housed within Karma, I believe.
Yeah, it is.
But is part of the music department as well. Jarek is not only an intermedia artist, pianist, composer, world traveler. I think I ran into him at a Gagaku concert in Tokyo once, just by chance. I'm like, Jarek, what are you doing? So, perhaps, I'm just checking here. There it is. Okay. Okay, so please, Jarek Kapuczynski.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me to speak with you. My presentation is about teaching intermedia composition, and it's I don't really like that opposition. I don't think it's an opposition, but it is not improvisation. It is actually coming kind of from the tradition that I'm most comfortable with myself, which is actually composition. I have to say that I improvise when I work on my compositions, but I don't perform. It's a very different kind of use of improvisation. So some of my thoughts about intermedia composition are limited actually to this kind of approach. Now, intermedia, it's a little bit like you were trying to say what you're doing in the department when I say I'm doing intermedia. What is it? And I have this very nice quote that we often use with our students when we start teaching one of the classes. It's a quote from Borges' short story. There's a certain Chinese encyclopedia entitled Celestial Empire of Benevolent Knowledge. In its remote pages, it is written that the animals are divided into belonging to the emperor, embalmed, tame, sucking pigs, sirens, fabulous, stray dogs, included in the present classification, frenzied, innumerable, drawn with a very fine camel hair brush, etc., having just broken the water pitcher, and then that from a long way off look like flies. Because of course it's such a wide range of things that we do when we do intermedia. It's very and when I'm sure that we are all kind of lost in it. So I will try to do a little bit the same kind of classification, I'm afraid. So it's not a very logical one. But it involves some of these terms which I find really useful, and it's I hope that maybe you'll find it too if you want to get involved in these kind of situations. So my premise, personal premise. First, I ask myself a question: so is it a reduction or an expansion? Because very often people tell me, "Oh yeah, so you expanded into multimedia." But then, of course, world is more than two media. World is actually many more senses. And so multimedia, the two media that we often talk about, sound and image, are actually a reduction. But it is also an expansion. But of course, ultimately, it's a composition. And this is something that I guess it's really important to remember when you think about this. That you have to build these things. And it's not about imitating reality, but you're really free to construct it. And to do this, one of my principles when I teach this is that I really believe that all the media that will be at the end have to be there at the beginning. And then, why and how do we connect the media? There are various things with people talking about synesthesia, about mapping, and various things. I particularly like this little text from Anne Carson's essay on what I think about most, where she quotes Aristotle saying that strange words simply puzzle us. Ordinary words convey what we know already, but it is from metaphor that we can get hold of something new and fresh. In what does the freshness of metaphor consist? Aristotle says that metaphor causes the mind to experience itself in the act of making a mistake. He pictures the mind moving along a plain surface of ordinary language, and suddenly that surface breaks or complicates and unexpected emerges. So what is a metaphor? Well, this is an example, and of course, technically, it's a figure of speech that has some mistake in it. It's basically that part of it cannot be literally applied to another part. And this tension, I think, is really then interesting to observe and construct when you do intermedia composition. So, in a sense, I'm teasing, I guess. It's not about how things fit, but how they kind of not fit to fit. So how do you create these metaphoric errors that ultimately end up with a new meaning? And there are actually very technical ways of looking at this, which is that there are basically two areas that these errors can happen. One are on the structural level, so this will be qualities like brightness and some things that we call often abstract. That music is of course very much taught that way, about harmony and vertical, horizontal organization and stuff like that, which are not associating meaning. But there's this whole area of semantic things that can happen in music, even though people say that there are mostly potentialities in music. But still, there are ways of connecting that. And of course, we are dealing with other media that have all those meanings. And so definitely those metaphors can be created, or errors, conflicts, tensions, can be created on both levels. And that's why it's interesting to study both. That's why it's interesting to study the meanings, the context, the culture of music, all the things that maybe were kind of sidelined in our traditional education, not only the structural things. At least when you're interested in marrying it with other media. So what is counterpoint? And because, of course, once you have these dissonances, let's say errors, usually you want to spread them over time. They kind of, depending on your style, you can be a very dissonant composer or resolve it more often or so on. So how do you build your counterpoint? And of course, the combinations of two media layers into a single texture in which each retains its own characters is kind of the ideal of polyphony, I guess. But there is, in the multimedia, there's a very interesting book by Nicholas Cook that talks about analyzing musical multimedia, where he points to kind of the ideas of polyphony and monophony, or polyphony, heterophony, monophony, but in different terms. Conformance, where the media are really very much together, and one usually is dominating. And with musicians, that often is the case when you start working with other media, is that you think about music as parameters and use those parameters to control other parameters in other media, which of course can result in interesting things, but not often. But then there's of course the idea of a little bit more challenging the situation where you try to in some ways compete for your attention, and that's, I guess, where more of that dissonance will happen, and that's in the contest idea. And there's a more cinematic kind of approach where there's more of a complementation, and I think these are very interesting. We could discuss what would we do, for example, with an idea of heterophony. What does heterophony in intermedia mean? The problem, of course, with thinking about counterpoint in other media than music is that they're not single notes, or they're not, in some ways, they're not parametric the same way music is. So they're not on the grid. There are lots of things that unfortunately we really cannot apply as much as we want. So it's better to stick to ideas of metaphor, I guess, and a little bit larger concepts. But still, it's inspiring, I think, to use some of the musical terminology. Now, one thing that I really take advantage of, I think it's really fabulous that we have it, particularly when you compose, is that the computer is an audiovisual canvas. And of course, these are all the different kinds of applications that we use in class. I personally, usually when I teach the classes, I don't teach, well, occasionally, I give certain, let's say, crash courses on some of these applications, but I really find that it's not my role to teach students applications. But usually they actually pick it up in other classes. So in my classes, I usually try to take advantage of what they bring in. It's in some ways my role is limited, of course, but that's kind of what it is. So I'll tell you what are my classes mostly in Intermedia. One is an undergraduate class, sculpting with sounds, image, and words, and there's a regular class that I teach with Paul Marinis at Karma, and that's the one, the graduate class, the Intermedia workshop. And now let's look at some of the assignments that we give. And that mini encyclopedia, the encyclopedia, the Chinese, so-called Chinese encyclopedia invented by Borges, this served us very often as an inspiration for an assignment where students have to come up with examples of, in this case, for example, 5 photographs or 5 sounds, but they have to give categories to them. And of course, they read the Borges, and then it opens them up, and us to all these different ways how things are connected or disconnected and how they overlap. And in fact, they face immediately the idea that things cannot be really easily categorized and mapped and so on. So, on an undergraduate level, we also do very practical exercises, like just trying to do something with a single musical or visual experience in some ways. In different years, we do it differently. So let's say before going to multiple things like image, music, and words, we just try to combine the two and see how they speak to each other. And but then we end up doing haikus, kind of, where one oral, one visual, and one word expression have to coexist in time, and build some kind of entity. And we usually decide on the amount of time. Sometimes we actually use a specific software so that we're compatible. So I'm kind of contradicting here myself, but in this particular exercise, I try to use some kind of either Flash, or sometimes we do it in perfect. I'm actually going faster than expected in the panic of the situation. And then Intermedia Haiku Q. Now this is a project that I really enjoyed every time we do it with our graduate students. This is actually early in the Intermedia workshop, when each of them, kind of like in the Intermedia Haiku one, each of them has to come up with one oral, one visual, and one word expression, and we all share them so that if you're a person, let's say, I'm starting strangely with person B. So I'm person B, and I provide to the group one of each. What I need to do is a haiku that will have 3 words, 3 expressions of each. But I'll take one from person A and one from person C, and then person C will take from person B and person D. So then when we have the final presentation, we have this whole circular thing where each next presentation actually uses bits from the previous one and moves to the next. So there's this whole principle of actually disconnected collaboration, where actually no one who gave you those words is telling you what to do with them, but you have to reinterpret them in your way. And then ultimately, of course, everyone actually shows how they read the expressions that they provided. But it creates this very interesting kind of issue of collaboration, which is a step to something that I find really important. Collaboration really itself, when people work together, because I, personally, very often worked on my audiovisual projects just collaborating with myself. My visual and whatever all the different media that I was involved in were all in my own mind. So that's a very easy collaboration, but well, maybe not always, but mostly. And but with other people, it's of course there are other complexities. And I sometimes feel, and maybe one day we'll actually do this, although the Intermedia workshop kind of is a class on collaboration. We insist on certain kinds of collaboration in certain projects, because this is really a project-based class. So certain projects we say who is doing the collaborations, and the final project they can do on their own. And there are just a few ideas here, thoughts, and this is, I guess, my pretty much final slide, which is about some of the important things that I find about collaboration, but I really feel that there should be a course on this. But establishing roles, we find that it's always extremely important to establish who is doing what. And it is important that there's some overlap. It's not that the roles are so separate that basically people don't know what to talk about. But it's the roles, establishing who will make a certain decision. I think it's really important. Then true collaborators share full responsibility over the project. This is, I think, really important. Otherwise, you're basically, I guess, hiring help. But the idea is that everyone feels that they have it's also very important that not to fall into the trap of trying to please and kind of split the difference so that you fit the group, or because ultimately it just results in something average. Well, it's always better to try something full-heartedly. And these are, again, it's 15 minutes is very short. I used, I guess, this opportunity simply just to tell you some of the thoughts that come through my mind when I teach Intermedia. Our program is not it's not an Intermedia program. It's even our program, the Music Science and Technology Master's degree that we have at Karma. Of course, now the Intermedia workshop became a required course for it, which I have mixed feelings about. But it's I think that. I find it really great that we have this opportunity now to using. I really find myself empowered by the computer as a canvas to be able to work on these kind of metaphors. But ultimately, and you'll see it tonight, I really care about live performance. And so this is a completely different topic that I didn't address here. But I think that I really thought about it very much after BJ's or during his presentation. This is all doesn't really matter because it's all about the performance in the body. But I really appreciate being here because exactly I can go on tangents like this. Okay, thank you very much.
Wow, spot on, 15 minutes. All right. I'd like to open it up to discussion of any sorts. Questions?
Well, I just want to ask a question about it. I was wondering how much people in your program interact with people in composition and the other programs.
All the time. And, the ones that are really interesting in composition, they can take lessons, even one's taking one, David, actually. So you get a composition lesson if that's what you're interested in doing. But, depending, we don't put them in a box that you have to do this. If they're interested in that, it's totally open and free, and there's infrastructure to do that. But without having composition or performance training for being on stage, or someone as part of the group, like you were saying, someone that you're collaborating with who that, obviously won't work out.
my period moment as moderator. Yeah.
I wonder, besides just the creative act of making a robot machine create music, what type of musical benefits do you think that brings to your program? Making instruments play as a kind of a human, or is there non-human elements that you
I mean, I think the point is to actually not make it play like a human would. The point is to make instruments that can do things that you couldn't do unless you had those instruments. You know, and for instance, I'm building a system right now for a concert next week where, you know, I made 20 little units that, like, you know, it's actually a red cap, and I'm putting all of the units underneath the audience seats, and they're not going to know they're there until the performance happens, and they're going to start hearing the sound from underneath your chair. So it's kind of scary, and so you can do things that you couldn't do with a speaker.
Cool.
Very small people.
Or with
Then, when you make these new instruments, how do you know when they're doing well and not?
When they're not on fire.
Just relying on electricity for their efficacy, that's it.
Well, no, and you have to talk to them. You have to have the signal, a way to talk to them. But, I mean, I think, like any instrument, right, like, when you write, what you write for a piano, you wouldn't write for a violin. So it's the same thing. It's like you have this new, you know, digital instrument, whether it's a robot or whether it's an interface, and then you find what affordances it has, and like what can you do with this instrument, and what, you know, you try and break it almost, get to the point where it breaks, learn where it breaks, and then don't do that during performance, and figure out.
But by is it by necessity that they do only one thing at a time?
No, but everything can go at
No, I mean the instruments you make. In other words, its task is to do this one thing you ask them to do. So right at that level, how do you, that's my question. Right at that level, when you, okay, I have this plan and I make it to this. This is what I want it to do. And it doesn't. And is that good enough?
But I think sometimes you have an idea of what you think it's going to do, and you design the instrument to do that. But then the key is working with lots of different composers and seeing what they would do it, and because they didn't have the mind of the person who's making the instrument is like, oh, I want to do this, and then another composer comes and like, you know, that's when the fires happen. But that's also when you learn, like, okay, I need to make this good enough for these other composers, and like, let's see what they're doing. Like, I've learned more about the instruments I personally built from watching other composers use them, and it's an incredible experience. And then it's pushing new designs. It's like, oh wow, we can do that. What could be the next?
Because I think metaphorically my question is about, you know, somebody plays piano better than others.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know whether this thing is doing that?
I guess I just don't think that's the point. I don't think it's a contest.
I like the one you just answered previously about when somebody else is using it and, you know, you get to see another sort of use. But I'm just curious, as a maker of this thing, when do you reach that satisfaction? Because that's really good enough. That just can't go any better.
I've never felt that satisfaction.
That instrument's not never good enough. That's an interesting question. When you make this thing that only does this one thing, you know, I guess it has something to do with the competency or the desire for higher competence. I don't know.
Well, this is, I mean, I guess there's a research question,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
when you're making, I mean, you are making objects that are meant to maybe exceed or supplement what humans do. But this can also be driven by actual study, like scientific, data-driven research about what it is that humans do and how they work with instruments. And is that
Play into the design. I mean, so we do like the engineering does, you know, have students working with, okay, so you're building this instrument, let's do repeatability tests, like if you want this to happen, like if you press in the same spot, does the same thing happen? Do you want that to happen is a different question, but, you know, let's actually do research to see how these things work. You know, we're building string instruments right now, and, you know, we are looking at, like, when a human strikes a string, what is the Fourier analysis of that, and what is that? And now, when we have all these different plucking mechanisms, what are those? How do those compare? And then, but then it comes to the aesthetic questions, like, do we want it to sound like a human?
Right.
Is there something that we can learn the way from the human is? Yeah, but is that the ultimate goal? And then that really depends on the artist. But as long as, like, I agree, like, you need to have the research ability to be like, okay, what is actually going on in this design? But then be able to make a decision as an artist, like, oh, I want to go this direction or that direction, to make this thing sound.
One.
Okay. So I think following this line of thought, my question will be like, so you as faculty, and how do you evaluate these kind of things, besides the fact that they work, you know? Because after all, it's a MFA program, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, like, you as faculty, and how do you encourage your students to evaluate that work, I don't know, aesthetically or still artistically, besides the fact that, like I said, it works?
Yeah.
That's it.
That's a really good question, and it's like a moving target because every single student is doing something completely different, so you can't really evaluate like it in the same rubric, right? So it's like you have to basically, what are their goals? You know, one key thing is with our MFA program, the students get to meet with their mentor, okay, every week for an hour. So you have an hour meeting with your mentor. You make a plan in the first semester, like what are the ideas that you think you want to do? Let's get all the background classes going. And then as you evolve through your degree, you know, what you want to do keeps changing. And the idea is there's definitely a written component. So you actually have to write a thesis. You have to write down your process of how you're going through this experimental journey. And it's funny because it's such a big difference from when they haven't written down what they want to do and then when they have written it down. Because once they write it down, they actually know themselves what they're doing. So that being part of the process, I think helps, you know, both sides come together. You know, make an outline, this is what we're going to do, and this is how we're going to put it together. And some people go more technical, and they're like, okay, this is my technical journey of how I'm building these things. And then some people, especially this year, who are graduating people, are very aesthetic, and they're putting their work into, you know, an aesthetic context. This is the history of the work of people who've come before me. This is what I'm trying to do, and, you know, do they actually get it?
Yeah, so but where do you kind of draw the line between this kind of program becoming like an MFA program and becoming like an engineering program or something? I think that's kind of a...
The thing is that I believe that engineering is not, it's like, that's, to me it's like saying like, you know, when are we going to draw the line between a music programmer and maybe someone like writing? It's like, even writing English is the same thing as doing engineering. It's like at a certain point, we're all going to have to do it. And it's just part of it. We're not teaching engineering the way we do it in engineering school. They would get kicked out of engineering school, right? This is like, how do you learn enough so that you are prepared and you can now think outside the box enough to actually accomplish your aesthetic dreams? That's it.
That.
Yeah, I have a couple of comments. I just, speaking as a composer who's worked with these kind of instruments, I mean, the way I think of it is that you've got, whether it's computers and electronics or mechanical devices, you've got resources, and and then also people that are also resources, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses, and you try to maximize what they can all do, and rather than trying to make one be like the other, and it's kind of a man-machine symbiosis or them supporting each other. And now you also throw in making instruments as part of the mix. Then you try to make the best instrument you can that will do something that you want to do that complements that whole mix. And this whole question of like which program it's in and how do you know when it's, I mean, to me that's all kind of an artifact of academia and not really the point of what we're doing, which is exploring just what art is. Kind of babbling.
Yeah, I've got a question for Yar. When you're dealing with these intermedia ideas, so you're dealing with visual aspects and word aspects and music aspects, I'm sure you encounter students who feel very comfortable in one and very uncomfortable in some other aspect of that. Are there particular ways that you have found help them get around that, or develop some comfort, or deal with their discomfort, or, I mean, whatever you need to do to get that to happen?
Yeah, well, you know, of course, it's as you said yourself, it's very individual. So that's why actually most, I guess, of my kind of intermediate teaching is more in the individual, even classes. These are classes, but usually, of course, when students have these ideas, they want to explore things, they would do it in individual study, because it's then you really can address it more. Some of it, of course, just through those assignments that are simpler in a way, that just involve something. These elements are shorter or smaller, and only two or something. That of course helps because it breaks the ice. But that's when they develop the what I find, at least, they develop that overlap possibility with others who actually will know about that area. So they, you know, I don't want to force them to be comfortable in every possible area. This is not the point. Everyone has their own mix, kind of. But I think that one thing that I hope that if they are really thrilled by having their work somehow in a more intermediate format, but they don't want to be specialized in these others. They don't have to, but they have tried it. So that's enough in a sense to then create a certain overlap and understanding of, okay, I understand now why I cannot do image, because this is actually hard. But
I've done enough image that I can now communicate with someone who does image.
Yeah, and appreciate actually what the other is to some extent. So it's kind of breaking the ice. You know, one of the limits, of course, of our program is it's a quarter system. These are very short. So those of you who are in a quarter system, you know it's 10 weeks. That's not a lot. And also, it's not it's not like a conservatory of music, a conservatory of intermedia. So in a sense, it is unfortunately pretty superficial. But on the other hand, you know, hopefully it opens some ideas. I just not to be overly ambitious. You know, I find that the same problem that you were talking about earlier about how do you measure these things? Because again, how are you going to judge someone who has absolutely no knowledge about visuals, comes in so fresh, and how are you going to compare them? It's a very tricky thing. But I think one important thing is when you begin the process of a work, that you establish what is it that they want to do, and then measure it against that plan. Measure it against that, what were their hopes, and how much work they did to accomplish that. And that's one of the ways of judging this. And maybe they have failed, but as long as they realize where were the problems or something, they learned a lot, I think it was totally worthwhile.
Jason, you had a comment.
Yeah, so this is a question for either of you or both of you. Maybe it's a little sort of mundane, under the hood kind of question. What kind of resources are needed to launch the programs or the classes? And just wondering, in terms of sort of sustainability on a certain level, how you manage kind of resource allocation over time for these courses? Because the projects in both of your presentations, it kind of felt like the projects could be sort of one-time costs based on launching a class, and then the next time you teach the class, you have to go find more funding for the next group of students. How does that work for you guys?
You know, I really am a big believer of open source. So it's like, in terms of a lot of the beginning of doing visual work, again, I think you can do all at the open source level, which bears a lot of the cost. And then, you know, there's very minimal cost in setting up a lab with some soldering irons. As long as you buy high quality stuff, it will last, you know, for a long time. And then the students themselves, the thing that's amazing, like, what, you know, every 5 years things like drop 1/4 in price. Like, it's insane. You know, like 5 years ago, 3D printer was $100,000, and now we bought one for $500. Like, that makes no sense. You know, it finally like gets to this level where artists can finally afford to do it. And you know, with SparkFun and Adafruit, and like, I remember when I was trying to buy a 4 sensing resistor at Princeton, it was like, Harry would have to get 4 different schools for us all to agree, like, we're going to get these interlinked things. They were, $4,000. You have to buy them at that level. And they would come in, he put it next to, his 1/4 of these sports sensors, in his office, and the janitor came and threw it away. And so sports sensors on. And now the students can buy them for $4 by themselves. It's like, that's amazing. So it's gotten to the point where, like, software's become open source, and now hardware's become open source. There's this instrument maker from CalArts, who built the Mon, Brian Crabtree, and he's amazing because he went and started this company, and he made this beautiful instrument, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to believe in the environment and everything like this. Like, I'm going to give all my designs on how to make this instrument completely away to the public. And so you can just go and ask him for it's on his website, and you can go print the PCB yourself, and you can make the instrument locally. And it's the first time, I believe, that since like a keyboard, that someone has made an instrument that thousands of people are using. Thousands and thousands of people are using this one interface. And that's what it's about. Then you can actually have a conversation with the world that, hey, how do you use this thing? And like, what's going on? And then, right after that, the corporations came in, and now you have everyone trying to build the same open source instrument. And it's weird. But sorry, getting back to your thing, like, I don't think it has to be expensive.
There's one very inexpensive way, and I have to tell you that with the undergrads, it's actually very inexpensive and very real to them, is they do things for the web. So they do this, like the haikus, for example, they do so that they can show it to their friends. And this, they actually go through just tutorials, all softwares. We provide, of course, software, but as a just campus even. So it's independent of the humanities or our department. Just that all the cluster machines, they have some software for web design, and that's basically enough, because that's. And we also provide, of course, software on our computers. But the thing is that they don't want to use it because they want to use their laptops anyway. Except that, for example, in the final project where we, particularly with the Intermedia workshop, it always ends with, we take over basically the whole building, the Karma building, and we need to share it. So every possible room that they want to use and transform in some ways, they have to decide how they are going to do this. But basically, they look at all the resources and all is at their disposal. And of course, bless John Chowning and the endowment of Karma, that we actually have a few things available to them in terms of we have a lab where they can solder whatever they want to, and they take classes to know how to do this. And also, when I got the job there 5 years ago, someone advised me very nicely that this is the time when you want to ask for money. And so I got, I think, $70,000 to buy some projectors and buy some things that are now available to students. So, short throw projectors that are very flexible. You can do really a lot of things with them. Some screens and some materials. So it's $70,000 actually went a long way. I'm surprised for how many years we can do these extravaganzas with. So yeah.
Good question, Jacob.
Audrey, you were talking about the difference between pre-recorded human performances being, manipulated by a machine as opposed to actually having machines play the instruments, and seeing that in the footage in a live concert element. Maybe trying to tie it into what CJ was saying earlier about the separation and the connection between just hearing the music and physically seeing it. What kind of precedents that can potentially break through, how that might tie into the idea of the apathy of the musicians, the people playing the music, and how having a different visual element would change that, if they're connected.
Well, I mean, I think it's a really good, goal for musicians. I think like computer music, at a certain point was, you go and you listen to these instrumental pieces, and there is no performer, and then but it was very group close, and and lots of thought went into what was happening. And then we got into this era of building, these interfaces. As things started getting affordable, then it was like, okay, I'm going to go up on stage and perform, but I'm not going to have any composition. It's almost like a demo, which is like death is another way of killing the whole thing. So it's like kind of the emergence of these two together. It's like, how do you build an instrument for yourself that you can perform on stage, and it isn't about your computer, and it is about you actually, practicing and doing this new form. But the idea of composition is so important in making it happen. How do you make sure that you have a form? How do you make sure that, this isn't a demo, this isn't, MIT, this is, a music school. And what are you doing with this instrument to make sure that this is going to be, something that people remember and like, and you yourself like it, and you could possibly play it again. Maybe it'll be different, but there's intention. And every person does it in a different way. There's a way of take hyper instruments ideas where you take the skill you have from playing these instruments and add sensors to it, and then there's the idea of building something completely entirely new that's completely crazy. But just like anything else, it takes years to get good at the instrument you've made. So if we can get them playing a 2-minute piece that's they're happy with, I think we succeeded in the end of the day. As long as they go on after.
That's one more question.
Yeah, just a reflection again. We seem to be skirting around the issue of the virtuosity debate, right? What that's going to look like. And my thought on this is, well, two things. I mean, the creator of the instrument doesn't necessarily have to be the person that actually goes out and works wonders on the instrument if we're looking for that. But I was also thinking about early hip hop usage of technology. I mean, it wasn't the Princeton Electronic Music Studio. We were writing, I wasn't, but other people were writing the reds, and it was like the misuse of that technology. And then we created this whole new form of practice and expression. So I kind of like the idea that there could be like mistakes. Mistakes could be made, and the machines kind of maybe really opens the possibilities of interpretation of lots of mistakes. I think that's a great way to think about where we're going with all these new instruments. Let's forget that in the history.
I like very much the DJ more about what he's studying, the detail, the minute difference in things, and I think that because of course at Karma also the students build a lot of instruments and so on, and trying to develop instrument that actually has the detail, the human, the body, as the DJ was saying, and the different kind of aspiration that an instrument can have, and try to think about it. It's not just about it working, but it actually has sophistication to it. There is some possibility of refinement, and I think this is really important. That's, I guess, where we get really excited when someone does an instrument. You see, like, wow, there is a whole human that can actually play it, not just your 5 fingers, although we know that those can do a lot. But I think this was not the right one. But not 5 digits.
So it seems to get into exploring these details and being able to get people to be making mistakes and stuff like that. You need a community surrounding an instrument. And it seems like the best way to do that is maybe through commercial means. I mean, the reason so many people are interested in Jimmy Page is because the electric guitar is such a widespread thing to get. Is there anything at Cal or at Stanford, any intention to help students with some sort of commercial avenues with their instruments? Or is it purely experimental? Because I feel like with the purely experimental route, you end up with everything being a prototype.
Well, I don't know. Karma is very unusual because we have Go Wang, and of course he is a co-creator of one of the most successful iPhone companies, and with the Smule, he co-created Smule, which they have lots of different apps. And I have to agree that a lot of the students are very motivated by the fact that his research is basically leading to something that their friends from high school are using. There is that, but I think there is also I will still defend though the idea of if there are some places where certain kinds of research can happen, it's practically their obligation that they do it. What I'm thinking is that, for example, at Karma, there is this room which has 20-some speakers, with a floor which is on the grid, and so you're basically in the ball of sound. So you do a piece there, and where are you going to be performing it? But this is, I guess, the wrong question, because on the other hand, there is a value that an institution like Stanford, for example, who can push certain ideas they have an obligation to do it in a sense, because no one else can. And they can, if this actually pushes our understanding of something, it's still worth it. So I guess both of these have to happen.
I think there are two types of people. There's like the people who are constantly, coming up with these ideas that are like crazy, and that type of person shouldn't be sitting there manufacturing, or setting up a manufacturing process to, make 100 or 100,000 or whatever it is, of the same instrument. They should be working on coming up with new ideas. What's the next instrument? What's the next instrument? But then there are students, who will probably turn into that type of person where they get an idea and how do you perfect it to actually get it out to the community and working it. I don't think, like I was saying, this idea of open source hardware is a very cool way of doing it. How can you put the designs out to actually let other people, copy and make these type of instruments? I think there's a movement that has definitely started in that direction. But, at CalArts, the students are very interested in patents and what they are. And, this year, we're starting to put in time into, figuring out entrepreneurship and figuring that out. I know one of my students has already filed 2 patents this year. But it's crazy because the ideas have nothing to do with music, but he's learning to think outside the box, and I can't say what he's doing, but it's completely
Can you patent, an Arduino patch?
No. I mean, the thing is what is it? I mean, a patent is as good as your lawyer, right? So you have to learn and understand that. So we really try and push publish, come up with your idea and publish it, and give it away to the community and get people to figure out that way. In a way, you're protecting yourself.
Sorry. I'm flashing the card at everyone, not you. Thank you very much, Gareth.